All right, so last week we spent time understanding biblical model evangelism. We learned also about the role of using questions in our evangelism. Has that kind of been percolating in you guys? The importance of asking questions? Remember, evangelism is about dialoguing, not declaring, not trying to figure out where the idiot doesn't know something true and you just have to teach them how wrong they are, right? Because you learned, right? No, this is, if we learn one thing about evangelism in this course, it's this. It's evangelism is not about building walls. It's about building bridges. All right, so we build bridges to where we have something in common, where somebody shares some sort of biblical understanding, even though they might not attribute that to being biblical understanding. So, and it's helpful for us to ask questions. All right. Tonight we're going to spend some time understanding defeater beliefs. If you don't know what they are, that's okay. We're going to talk about them within our culture and how to overcome or dismantle them. And then we're going to discuss formation of evangelism partnership teams. And we will role play the one verse evangelism. Woo-hoo. Yeah, what? That's like over the top.
Oh, you're going to go off the cliff.
I don't know what we're thinking here. Okay. Any questions, guys? Any questions from the previous weeks? Any thoughts? Anything? Tom?
The video that was just an awesome video.
Last week's? Yeah.
And I only used that technique on a couple of people asking questions.
Yeah.
It's very, very effective.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's all about, hello, I want to get to know you. I'm not going to treat you like an evangelism project, right? I want to know what makes you tick. So, okay, so here we are today. We've got one lecture, and that's defeater beliefs. And this is based on a number of people's work, so, I'm not plagiarizing because I'm confessing it there. There we go. What are defeater beliefs? Okay? Here's a basic definition. Every culture hostile to Christianity holds to a set of, quote, common sense, consensus beliefs that automatically make Christianity seem implausible to people. These are what philosophers call defeater beliefs. A defeater belief is belief A that, if true, means belief B can't be true. All right? If we lost you, don't worry. Here's an example. If I told you I saw a fire-breathing dragon in my backyard yesterday, no one is going to ask me what color it was. It's not even worth asking questions about it because it can't possibly be true. Why? Because we all have a defeater belief that says dragons don't exist. All right. Now, more of a defeater belief with regards to Christianity example. Some people not even give Christianity a listen because they hold to a defeater belief that science has disproved Christianity. There's your, fill it in, there you go. Because they believe this, they do not consider Christianity as a plausible worldview. Does that make sense? Unless this defeater belief plus any others is addressed in a satisfactory manner, the person will tune out the gospel as irrelevant. Case in point, Florian Koch. He was going to Stony Brook getting his PhD in marine science, and he thought you couldn't be a Christian and a scientist at the same time. I said, well, mother's a Christian scientist, but that's a cult. That's a different thing. And so it took some dismantling before he would even begin to consider Christianity. So every culture has them. So we must realize that these Nate Burns, thanks for making the coffee. Great job. It's done.
It's
All right.
delicious.
It's decaf, so it's low octane.
A little half of
Oh, shush. All right, so every culture has them. We must realize that these defeater beliefs are just in the air we breathe in a particular culture. Often they have not been thought through as much as adopted in soundbite sort of ways. Here's what Tim Keller writes. He says, each culture has its own set of culturally based doubt generators, which people call objections or problems with Christianity. When a culture develops a combination of many wildly held defeater beliefs, it becomes a cultural implausibility structure. In these societies, most people don't feel they have to give Christianity a good hearing. They don't feel that kind of energy is warranted. They know it just can't be true. This is what makes evangelism in hostile cultures so much more difficult and complex than when it was under Christendom. Ironically, one's culture's defeater beliefs often contradict another culture's defeater beliefs, as in different cultures. The classic expression of this point is by G.K. Chesterton in his book Orthodoxy, from his chapter on paradoxes of Christianity. Here's what he writes. This is really good, so you pay attention though. As I read and reread all the great non-Christian or anti-Christian accounts of faith, a slow, awful impression grew gradually, but graphically upon my mind. This is before he was a Christian. Christianity must be the most extraordinary thing. It was attacked on all sides and for all contradictory reasons. No sooner had one rationalist demonstrated that it was too far to the east than the other demonstrated with equal clearness that it was much too far to the west. No sooner had my indignation tied down at its angular and aggressive squareness than I was called up again to notice and condemn its enervating and sensual roundness. They did prove to me in chapter 1, to my complete satisfaction, that Christianity was too pessimistic. And then in chapter 2, they began to prove to me that it was a great deal too optimistic. I simply deduced that Christianity must be something even weirder and wickeder than they made it out. You see what he's saying? He says people are saying all kinds of things about Christianity, and the things that they're saying, their objections for why it's so bad, contradict each other. So that if you sit and you listen to them, you're wondering, how messed up must this Christianity be, right? And then we go, and then in a quiet hour, a strange thought struck me like a still thunderbolt. Nobody writes like that anymore. Suppose we heard an unknown man spoken of by many men. Suppose we were puzzled to hear that some men said he was too tall and some too short. Some objected to his fatness. Some lamented his leanness. Some thought him too dark and some too fair. One explanation would be that he might be in odd shape. But there's another explanation. He might be the right shape. Outrageously tall men might feel him to be short. Very short men might feel him to be tall. Perhaps, in short, this extraordinary thing is really the ordinary thing. At least the normal thing, the center. Perhaps, after all, it is Christianity that is sane in all its critics that are mad in various ways.
That's awesome.
Okay? I don't know if you follow that or not. Maybe I can explain it to you later. But it's just a great way of looking at it.
Well, he's also one of the greatest minds of his time, right?
Yeah, he's pretty sharp. Yeah.
We're
My dad said I was
grateful
sharp.
for his help.
My dad used to say I was sharp as a marble. And I'm still trying to figure that out, but it feels like quite a compliment. Quite a compliment. We have seats back there, folks, up here. If you want to seat, Lisa, you want to sit? No? You just sit. You're okay. Okay. All right. Where am I? I'm trying to figure out where I am.
Right there.
Oh, there we are. Keller. The defeater beliefs of a Western secularist are quite different from someone from a more traditional culture. Skeptics ought to realize then that the objections that they have to the Christian faith are culturally relative. Okay? Let me give you an example. Take, for instance, one of the Western secularist defeater beliefs titled The Other Religions. It states that Christianity is implausible. There you go. Why? Because it claims to be the only way to God. That's how people are in our culture, right? It's not even worth listening to because of that. Many of our neighbors on the East End will never give Christianity a genuine consideration because they hold closely this defeater belief. Now take, for instance, someone living in a Muslim culture. Muslims in the Middle East reject Christianity, but not because it claims to be the only way to God. Muslims agree that there is only one way to God, but Christianity is not the way. The primary reasons Muslims in the Middle East reject Christianity, it's really another defeater belief, is because they view the Western Christian culture here as corrupted and evil. So they won't even give it a, so that's the defeater belief in the Muslim world. you know, look how the Christians behave in America, how bad they are. There's no way I'll even consider Christianity. All right. Defeater beliefs affect both Christians and non-Christians. This is because we all live in the culture, and everyone's affected, positively or negatively, by the culture in which he lives. If defeater beliefs are not dealt with, then even believers will still have unbiblical presuppositions. Defeater beliefs are not appropriated thoughtfully, right? People don't go out and say, I'm going to come up with a defeater belief about Christianity, right? Most people do not come to them by a process of systematic, there is the word, study and reasoned thought. They came to them by a mix of ideas picked up from the culture and the experiences they had in their lives. In other words, most people did not come to them through reasoned argument, and thus they can't be dealt with simply through reasoned argument. There is a personal aspect to every defeater belief. The reason many people in our culture find Christianity not worth even considering is both a combination of certain beliefs, and the bad experiences they have had with Christians and the church. And as Tim Keller says, they are partly right. They are right to be offended by the behavior they have experienced, but often wrong about the belief they think is behind it. To deal with defeater beliefs and help both Christians and those who are not Christians understand Christianity, we must deal with both the theoretical aspect and the personal aspect. Why should we care about defeater beliefs? One, because we need to see that we are what we're really up against. Because we need to see what we're really up against in seeking to help our friends and neighbors understand and embrace the gospel. This transforms the typical Christian view of evangelism and helps us understand the difference between a church with a missions program and a missional church. Does that make sense? No longer, if we've been talking about it, especially with that angle scale, you know, this flies in the face of traditional evangelical understanding of how people come to faith. Have a big tent revival. You know, invite people to a Billy Graham crusade. And then you've got this big tearjerker, come to Jesus moment. That's how many churches in America think evangelism is to be done. It's about a one-off. It's about me grabbing a stranger and inviting them, right? But man, people have these defeater beliefs. They're going to listen to somebody and they're just going to tune it out and say, you know, you Christians, you only think there's one way to heaven, so I'm not even going to listen to this, right? So, your testimony isn't enough. Oh, darn it. Isn't that horrible? You just turn your testimonies in. It's fine to give your testimony, but do you understand the defeater beliefs that are coloring how people hear it? If people have a defeater belief that everyone needs to find their own truth, then they hear your testimony as interesting, but not as compelling. That's why those couple friends of mine, after I came to faith in Christ, they wanted me to come out for lunch. We went out to lunch. They each wanted to know on separate occasions what has changed in my life. I told them my Christian testimony, and I implored them to believe the gospel. And they all said, I'm glad you found something that works for you, right? Mm-hmm. There's defeater beliefs that if I would have spent more time asking them questions, I might have had a better experience there, right? We must recover the art of persuasion. We must be willing to listen. Write that down. There you go. Listen and consider what other people believe. We must be able to speak to the real issues rather than offering a canned approach. We must learn to speak to people as a give and take dialogue rather than a declaration. Conversation takes time. We must understand that most people come to embrace the gospel as a series of mini decisions, as Keller puts it. People become Christians over time through a process of persuasion. People become Christian over time through relationships with Christians, both individually and corporately. People become Christians over time through multiple exposures to the gospel and from multiple different angles. I hope we're realizing, evangelists, for us to do well at evangelism as a church, our people need to realize we're here for the long haul. God has put us in relationships with people for a reason, and we need to be the loving, kind, patient, question-asking, bill-bridging people that the gospel calls us to be and that Scripture calls us to be, individually and corporately. People must first want Christianity to be true. Isn't that wonderful to hear? People must want it to be true before they will listen to you. We must understand that people generally aren't interested in hearing your arguments for why you believe Christianity is true until they are attracted to its beauty and want it to be true. Then when you deal with defeater beliefs, you are on the same side, so to speak. You are then in a position of helping them work through barriers to belief that they want to be able to overcome. Second, because understanding defeater beliefs helps us to love people. Understanding defeater beliefs impresses upon us, again, the importance of love and personal relationships to helping our friends understand and embrace the gospel. Of course, this is much more difficult than just being the answer man or woman, or giving people a book, or bringing them to church so that the pastor can convert them. I'm not against you bringing people to church, but hopefully we come to realize that there's a reason why you guys have been inviting people to church and they don't come. And it's not because they don't like your perfume, or they don't have a car, right? Or they couldn't make time on Sunday mornings. They've got defeater beliefs. It's totally irrelevant for them to even be there, right? And so they don't mind, just being able to say, I was busy this weekend. They'd rather just say that, right? And because we have doubts too. Understanding the defeater beliefs helps us to understand and deal with our own doubts. The defeaters affect everybody in our culture, and many of our own doubts are connected to the defeater beliefs in our culture. So that's all I'm going to say on that, is we're going to go through these defeater beliefs. I got a list of 20 of them. You're going to go, okay, I still kind of maybe wrestle with that, or I wish I knew a really good answer to that one. Or that one used to be really tough for me. I think I kind of got the answer, but I'd like to know more about it. All right? Common defeater beliefs in American culture. All right, so here we go. 7 defeaters identified by Timothy Keller in his book, The Reason for God. And understand this, I'm going through these defeater beliefs, and then in a little bit I'm just going to go through them, and later we're going to just kind of argue a few of them. But these are just really short, simple answers. All right. The first one is, there can't just be one true religion. The pluralism defeater, that's what it is. Other ways of stating it include, all religions are different ways to the same God. To believe otherwise is to be arrogant and or naive, and we must tolerate everyone. Intolerance is dangerous in a post-9/11 world. Also included under this category is the belief that religious belief is too culturally conditioned to be truth for all people. Next we have, how could a good God allow suffering? Suffering proves that there is either no God, or else the God who is there is either not good or not powerful enough to do anything about suffering. Next is, Christianity is a straitjacket. Why would you want to buy into something that would limit my freedom to live as I want to live? Why would I want to buy into something that is culturally rigid and requires all cultures to become like this Western European religion? Never mind, it came out of the Middle East 2,000 years ago. The church is responsible for so much injustice. In fact, as you study that last one about, thinking that Christianity is just like a Western, white evangelical movement, it's not. And it's all over the world. And, amazing transformation of people from all different cultures is taking place. And it's not making them white Americans. It's making them beautiful Africans who love Jesus and are being transformed. It's making them beautiful, Puerto Ricans and, Peruvians. And, even Canadians are taking part. So, another defeater belief. The church is responsible for so much injustice. Christian leaders are on TV, or that should be on TV. Adriana, you are correcting me on these things, right? Where is Adriana? She went to the bathroom. Okay. Christian leaders on TV are manipulative and dishonest. I saw that before I became a Christian. And the history of the church is not a glowing record either. Perhaps the biggest deterrent to Christianity for the average person today is not so much the church's history of violence and warfare, but the shadow of fanaticism. Many non-believers have friends or relatives who have become, quote, born again and seem to have gone off the deep end. One of the bartenders at the public house tells me regularly how hard it is to hang out or be around his in-laws because his mother's one of these born-agains and she just makes him feel so, bad. Anyway, you must realize that many people who have rejected Christianity in our culture have had significant exposure to Christians and to the church. Next one, how can a loving God send people to hell? Right, this is a very common defeater. Keller speaks of two related defeaters under this category. A God of judgment simply can't exist because everyone is free to choose their own morality, or a God of judgment can't be a God of love, right? Next, you can't take the Bible seriously. Under this category, Keller includes the beliefs that we can't trust the Bible as historically accurate, and we can't trust the Bible culturally. We're moving through these fast. Keller writes, when I came to New York almost 20 years ago, the main problem people have with the Bible were in the areas of science and history. Today, things have shifted somewhat. I find more people now especially upset by what they call the outmoded and regressive teaching of the Bible. It seems to support slavery and the subjugation of women. These positions appear so outrageous to contemporary people that they have trouble accepting any other parts of the Bible's message. I would add to that homosexuality. Science has disproved Christianity. This was one of the main defeaters when modernism reigned. It has died down in the age of postmodernism, but with the recent onslaught of books like Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, it is back on the rise. Beliefs under this category include the belief that miracles can happen and that evolution has disproved the Bible. I remember a kid came to our church once and he had the God Delusion book with him instead of his Bible, and he wanted to show me how wrong I was. I was willing to listen. We sat down and we talked a bit, but anyway. Let's see. Several more common defeater beliefs. So these aren't Keller's, but this is from a book called On Christians written by Dave Kinnaman. He says, in recent surveys of those outside of the Christian faith between the ages of 16 and 29, the top 3 descriptions or perceptions of what Christianity is that it is 1, anti-homosexual. 91% of people say that. 2, it's judgmental. 87% say this. And hypocritical. 85% say this. Okay? So you might not like to hear that. It probably doesn't make you feel good, right? That this is what people think of us as Christians. But it's what they think. You know, and so we just can't act like it isn't there. And so, a defeater belief is Christianity is anti-homosexual. Sadly, many in our culture believe that Christians hate gays. Christians are judgmental. The fact is, the church is known mostly for what is against in our culture. And that's true. Christians are hypocritical. Christians are viewed as extremely hypocritical, and therefore, who would ever want to be a hypocrite? Isn't authenticity the most important thing? And then there's some other sources. The church is too political. The church is too political and is in bed with the Republican Party. There's people who believe this. There's people who say, oh, you're a minister, you must be a Republican. And now, what makes you think that? Why does that need to be the case? The imperialism defeater. All you Christians want are converts. You have no respect for others' views. This is seen in the history of the church as well as in my experience with born-againers. Christians just want to exploit the world and creation. We really don't care, they're anti-global warming or whatever. That's what people, Christians, you're just going to escape this world. You don't care much about it. Christians have no concern for art and beauty and the good things in this world. Christians are too heavenly minded to be of any earthly good and are always condemning stuff, or at least disregarding it, unless it's about Jesus. Christians have no concern to deal with the big societal issues like poverty and racism. Christianity just seems to care about people's internal spiritual lives, doesn't care about the big issues of life.
I'm sorry, the last two just seem so, like, based on what? I don't understand that. I mean, like, when you think of all
Yeah.
the charities and the hospitals.
Right.
Like,
Sure.
I mean, like, I'm totally willing to listen to, like,
Yeah.
legitimate, I understand why they
Right.
would think that we're anti-gay or even assume that people are Republicans that are Christians, but
Yeah.
how can
Sure.
someone, like, I just don't see
Art or
any
beauty
basis.
or,
Especially
yeah.
considering
Well, so
Michelangelo and think so many of the masters are.
sure. And
faithful.
yeah, Renaissance painters and philosophers even, and it's true, you know, what ended the slave trade? It was Christians, right? So here's the deal. So it goes back to Chesterton's point where he's saying,
Right.
you know, you seem too fat or too tall, or,
Yeah.
you know, we're going to appear that way to people, right?
Yeah.
There's a guy here that I've known for a number of years, and his big dig against Christians was that, you know, or religion, was that all the wars are started by religions. If it wasn't for religions, it'd be a much more peaceful place. And I said, well, is that really truly what you believe? I mean, are you interested in, like, knowing some facts about, like, the 20th century? The 20th century, about 100 million people were murdered by atheistic regimes, right?
Right.
So going back to World War I and going back to Stalin and to Mao and the Khmer Rouge, I mean, all this, it's,
And the Spanish
Right.
Inquisition was like a couple hundred.
so I
And
know,
a lot of
I
them
know.
were in effigy.
But here's the deal. So this is why a defeater belief, you need to understand about it. It's a closely held belief, but it's not. It comes about both theoretically and relationally. It's worked up in society. They've heard this stuff
Right.
from a high school teacher. They
Right.
heard it from some friend of theirs at a bar. Can you believe those Christians? They just want to start wars, right?
Right.
So that's where it comes from,
Okay.
right?
I
So-
would say specifically with the art thing, because so many Christians have often, you know, music is bad, dancing is bad, you know, sort of that putting up against art
Right.
culture. So
Can't go to movies.
I mean,
can't-
and this is how many of my friends think this way. I think about Christians don't like art because they think a lot of it is dirty. And then also I think with social issues, dealing with poverty and things like that, they see that as a social issue to take care of rather than the church. The church is just interested in Jesus and
Spiritual,
people
right.
coming to Jesus, not really
Yep.
helping people. That's what people are doing socially. So they see that as not something the church is
Yeah,
doing.
but most hospitals.
Even though hospitals are,
Right.
Started by Christians.
exactly,
But if
absolutely, yeah.
they are, then it is a ploy to ultimately bring them to Jesus.
Yeah.
All right, we're moving on, guys.
Food drive to-
All right, so
to
next one,
preach.
Christianity is just a way to justify an upper middle class bourgeois life. Who wants a safe, comfortable life? Christianity, it's boring and irrelevant. All truth claims are attempts to take power over someone else. Christians are in conflict with each other. You Christians can't even get along with each other. So why would I want to be a part of that, right? And last one that I have for us is Christianity makes people too sheltered.
The top 20.
What are some ways we as a church can begin to work on these defeaters? There's way too many for us to even begin to go through them all in this class and to sit down and do practice, role play. How would you sit down and discuss, the one way to God objection?
Reading Evangelism class number 2.
Ah, yep. That's gonna be at my house around the
30 minutes
fire
long.
with the scotch and a sketch pad, because I'm gonna do art while I'm there. All right, so I think tonight is just gonna whet your appetite on why. For some of you, this is like I never even really thought of this before. I've never really considered defeater beliefs and how people have them. Now that I think of my uncle so and so, yeah, I gotta start asking some questions. Now that I think of my brother or this friend at work. Right? And so this is just going to kind of wet your whistle tonight, and you're going to be given some things to look at later and point you to some resources. But it's just really important that you understand that there are defeaters. Everybody in our culture has them, right? Not all these defeaters, not all of these are defeaters for every person, right? So not everybody holds to all 20 of these, right? So it is vital to get to know people and discover, there you go, fill that in, What are their defeaters? This is why the great evangelist, Christian apologist Francis Schaeffer said once that if he had only an hour to spend with someone to talk about Christianity, he would spend 55 minutes asking them questions and 5 minutes formulating a response. We must be quick to listen and slow to speak. I don't know if maybe you had an experience in the last few weeks after we've been talking about this, the need to ask questions and to not, be so quick to figure out where the person's wrong and tell them why. That's how much evangelism is in America. Have you caught yourself like having to catch yourself not to open your mouth and maybe to ask questions? Anybody experienced that? Right? All right, got a couple heads nodding. Yeah, Francis Schaeffer, great. There's a Francis Schaeffer Institute at my seminary back in St. Louis, and great evangelist, apologist, and he asked questions, and then said, okay, all right, so here's what I'm thinking, and then he would lay it out for you, based on what he heard from you. It's like a custom-fitted suit, the gospel, instead of like some off-the-rack that's a few sizes too small, just force it on you, right? Okay, that's an extra, it's not in your notes. Remember, these are not just theoretical objections, okay? So, Amy, that's where, it's not a theoretical objection, People hold on to these, they're complex factors for why they actually hold on to these defeater beliefs. And just being reasonable with them isn't enough, right? There are non-negotiables in Christianity, okay? This is important. When dealing with these defeaters, we must be careful of giving away the farm and just trying to downplay things that are offensive to our culture. We shouldn't be saying, yeah, I know some Christians think that there's only one way, but let's just get you in the door first, right? So we want to avoid that, right? And there we go. Defeaters necessitate a multifaceted approach. To really begin to break down the defeaters and the perception of the implausibility of Christianity among our friends and neighbors, we must deal with them in a multitude of ways. So here's a couple of things. It is important for defeaters to be brought up and responded to briefly in sermons and other times when people speak in worship services. But this must be done quickly, preferably in 5 minutes or less, because otherwise it will seem combative and people quickly glaze over if they sense they're being given an apologetics lecture. So you probably notice, you'll probably notice it more now that you've heard some of the defeaters, but I regularly try to bring some up, in a sermon, Some of you here, can't really picture a God who's a God of wrath, but let me explain. Do you not tend to think this way at times too, right? So, and next, we must deal with defeaters in our conversations with people and in the way we live among people in our community, right? Don't be a hypocrite, right? If your neighbors are watching you, recycle, right? I don't know, right? Don't be a jerk, be careful what you post on Facebook. People watch that stuff, right? I've seen some crazy stuff this election cycle that Christians are posting. It's like, that's not really helpful,
My favorite example is the person rolling their eyes and huffing and puffing in the grocery store if someone's taking too long and long.
Yes.
Their I love Jesus sticker on their bumper and also on their neck and their
Yep, they're all, yep. You saw me at TJ Maxx the other day? Remember that people come to faith as a series of mini decisions, and the way we live is vital for breaking down people's stereotypes about what Christianity is. Want to wake up Mark there?
Yeah.
All right. It is vital that we're able to show we truly understand the defeater beliefs by stating it in its most persuasive form. If we create a straw man and then easily defeat it, we actually make things worse. What is that getting at?
It's when you misrepresent someone's position and then, dismantle it.
Yes. Yeah. So, the thing that we need to be able to do as Christians is we need to be able to understand another person's point of view, perhaps better than they do, so that when we describe it, they say, yeah, that's right, that's what I'm thinking, you're right, yeah, I can't believe that either, right, you know, and so we're actually, when we're talking to them, we're not, you know, creating some straw man, but we're actually describing what they believe quite well. And then they're gonna go, okay, I thought you were ignorant, but it seems like you know, and yet you don't believe that, so maybe I should listen, right? So it's really
Isn't it
important.
better for them to, you give them some information that maybe doesn't totally jive with the perspective, but then they begin to realize
Yeah.
they need to put the pieces together to see that it doesn't work. Let them figure that out, so to speak.
Well, that's part of reasoning with people with this, but the point of not having the straw man was, you know, you're not trying to find the areas of differences. You're trying,
Right.
when you're articulating and you're discussing with someone and you're articulating their point of view that you don't believe, you need to be able to describe it accurately.
Right.
that make
You don't want to
sense?
destroy the village to save to win the war.
You know, yeah. Anyway, Google straw man argument, and then if you still need help with that. We model what Christianity is about in everything we do. Thus, all of our church's programs, where the church decides to spend its money and energy, can either break down the defeater beliefs among our neighbors or contribute to strengthening them. Dealing with the defeaters. All right, we're making some headway here. We can't really do what we're trying to do. There is no way in one talk to respond fully to all the defeaters, and in fact, to try to do so might be counterproductive. But there's a few things that can be said, all right? Next thing, please don't copy this workbook and give it to your friends who aren't Christians. Hey, look at all these defeaters. I think you got a few of them, you know.
60-10.
Yeah, pastor gave me this. Yeah. Yeah, check out number 6. Jerk. Remember that for each defeater, there is both a theoretical and philosophical aspect as well as a personal dimension. For many of the defeaters, you can't get to the philosophical aspect until you have shown by your life, and the church has shown by its communal life together, that Christianity is not what they thought it was. For most people, this has to take place before they will even begin to address their philosophical or theological reasons for why they hold a defeater belief. Does that make sense? The relationship must be strong first and attractive, right? Not just strong as an odor, you know. For example, one defeater belief is that Christianity is anti-homosexual. For people who hold this defeater, they must first see Christians who personally aren't anti-homosexual before they can address the theoretical nature of their defeater. Does that make sense? We must wrestle with keeping Christ central in the way we respond to defeater beliefs. It is his beauty that draws people, right? Thus, it's not enough to defend our faith. We want to hold up Jesus as more beautiful and believable than all rivals.
Can I just go back to the anti-homosexual comment? That could be misinterpreted when you say it like that, so I think, could you elaborate on how you would not want to come off as anti-homosexual? Like,
People in our culture think we hate gays, Rick. That's what it is.
Right, but that's not what this says.
Well, we won't let
You
them
know,
in
who
the church.
personally aren't anti-homosexual, so
I'm not against them, like they're wicked
it's a
and
subtle
like.
distinction to make.
Okay, yeah.
Well, you know, we have this sort of phrase, hate the sin, not the sinner, so to speak. I hate to simplify it like that, but,
Yeah, so I get what you're getting at, but
so that's why I think he's getting at.
yeah,
I think everybody in the room gets it too.
yeah.
I don't.
All right, so,
If you have a married gay couple that comes in and wants to be a member of the church, you're gonna say no, right?
correct.
So
But they're
that's
welcome
where
to.
they get it from.
Yeah, well, you gotta understand, this is very, like, can't cover the whole thing in one night here. So, but it's true, that's one of the objections that people have. That we hate, that we're anti-homosexuals, as in we don't love them, or we don't care for their needs, or we don't wish for them to experience health and life and joy and economic flourishing, we
And restoration.
restoration. We love gay people, right? But to even begin to address that defeater belief that people have, they need to see us as kind and generous, loving people before they will sit down and say, okay, help me understand that, why Christianity holds to these doctrines, right? But you're not going to get to the persuasive phase until you've demonstrated that you actually aren't that straw man Christian. People have straw man opinions of who we are as Christians. Think we're narrow-minded, we're judgmental, we're anti-gays, that we are, that they have all these straw man things that are in their minds.
Everybody's the Westboro Baptist.
The people, they think they think those are Christians. I don't think they're Christians. I think they don't have any idea what God's grace is, right? So, moving on. The importance of many decisions. Okay, you guys there? The importance of many decisions. Tim Keller states that people ordinarily come to Christ through a process in which dozens of many decisions are made over time. Think of the angle scale, in which a number of many decisions are made before one is ready to even listen to the gospel with an open mind and heart. Tim Keller groups these many decisions into several different kinds. These could be seen as phases through which an unbeliever progresses on their way to faith in Christ. Now, we're going to go through these. They may seem like overkill, but I think it's important for us to go through them. The first one is plausibility, many decisions. Okay, so this is kind of where some people are. We have to begin at this level. Beliefs are only held as credible within a prevailing plausibility structure, the social and cultural context that makes any belief possible to hold. At the plausibility level, you don't discuss whether something is actually true or not. If a belief isn't plausible, its truth is not even up for discussion, because it's simply assumed, often without much conscious thought, that the belief in question is obviously untrue. Let me get an example here. Sheldon Van Auken, in his book, A Severe Mercy, talks about his coming to faith and the journey that it was. He says, Christianity was something I wanted nothing to do with. How could anyone believe such rubbish? I, indeed, had seen through the pretenses of Christianity in my teens and forthwith abandoned it. He is English, yes. How could any intelligent person actually believe it? Believe that an obscene crucified Jew, obscure, I'm sorry. That is an obscure crucified Jew was God, all right? The first many decisions such a person must make, if he is to move at all towards Christianity, regards its plausibility. Through these means, the Spirit begins to change the non-Christian's general impression, there you go, that's the word for you, of Christianity. Suddenly, Christianity isn't the totally implausible religion the person once thought it was. If we could listen in on a person's thoughts and hear what they were thinking at these plausibility many decisions were occurring, it would sound like this. Wow, she's a Christian and she's actually kind of cool. Or, I like her, she's intelligent and kind. These people aren't mean, narrow-minded, conservative. She seems to really care for me and others around her. She loves what she studies and takes school seriously. I just can't dismiss her religion anymore. Plausibility. Again, the story of Sheldon Van Auken's conversion shows us the power of relationships to challenge a hostile plausibility structure. Listen as he describes the Christian circle he and his wife fell into at Oxford. Sorry, it's not Oxford, Ohio, where you went, but this is like Oxford in England. These were our first friends, close friends. More to the point, perhaps, all five were keen, deeply committed Christians. Can you imagine how they landed? They landed there in Oxford, and like all these new friends are like, oh my gosh, we just landed with a bunch of Christians. All right. But we liked them so much that we forgave them for it. We began hardly knowing we were doing it. to revise our opinions, not of Christianity, but of Christians. See that? Our fundamental assumption, which we had been pleased to regard as an intelligent insight, had been that all Christians were necessarily stuffy, hideout, or stupid people to keep one's distance from. I don't know what hideout means, but
Highbrow, is what that should mean?
Hidebound.
hidebound. Oh, hidebound.
Hidebound.
I don't know.
Alright, pay me that.
I'm sorry. Yes. We had kept our distance so successfully indeed that we didn't know anything about Christians. Now that assumption soundly collapsed. The sheer quality of the Christians we met at Oxford shattered our stereotype. And thenceforward, a reference in a book or conversation to someone being a Christian called up an entirely new message. Well, image, dang it. Where's Paul Chewinski? I need to get my glasses. New image. Moreover, the astonishing fact sank home. Our own contemporaries could be at once highly intelligent, civilized, witty, fun to be with, and Christian.
Ooh, yeah.
So
Okay.
hidebound means unwilling to change because of tradition or convention.
Yeah, it's a real term.
So there we go. See him. Yep. Gotta love that Wi-Fi.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good job.
Your mercy.
Another turning point for Van Auken came when he confronted the evidence of truly intelligent Christian believers. What was so odd was that quite a lot of people, not just sheep, but highly intelligent people did apparently believe it. T.S. Eliot, for instance. In fact, quite a few physicists. The very last people one would expect to be taken in by it, philosophers too. Was it possible? Was there any chance that there was more to it than I thought? Of these Christian intellectuals, Van Auken says, and it wasn't just a matter of them keeping their childhood faith without examination either. See, that's what people think. Oh, you grew up with this, and so you're just holding on to it as like a vestige of your past because you were just raised in it. Some of them, intelligent people too, were actually converts from atheism or agnosticism. If minds like St. Augustine's and Newman's and Lewis's could wrestle with Christianity and become fortresses of the faith, it had to be taken seriously. Next, the relevance mini decisions. So the first was plausibility. And now once something gets, okay, the plausibility is kind of deconstructed, comes to the relevance mini decisions. The next most negative thing you can think about a particular belief system is that it's not only implausible, but also irrelevant to you personally. You don't perceive the worldview in question to speak at all to any of your pressing needs, real problems, hopes, fears, etc. Again, through relationship and individuals and groups of Christians plus good information, non-Christians can begin to see that Christianity is relevant to their lives. Relevant. What would these mini decisions look like? There really are some advantage to being a strong Christian. I see a lot of normal people here at RUF. That's a Christian college ministry. I see Christianity gives her a sense of meaning, purpose in life. It would be nice if I could believe like she does. Van Auken records a conversation between his wife, Davy, and himself about the happiness of their Christian friends. Imagine they're like at dinner, they're like sitting around, they're talking. And they're all so happy in their Christianity, said Davy. And I said, could it be that happiness, what's called Christian joy? Do you think? All right, now comes content mini decisions. These are misconceptions about what Orthodox Christians really believe. And begin to get cleared up, and basic concepts understood. Understood, that's the word you're looking for. Whereas enough information may have been gotten through in the plausibility relevance phase to destroy their straw man version of the Christian faith, Now enough new information gets through to begin to give them a good understanding of what the Christian worldview is all about. This especially involves clearing up specific misconceptions a particular culture or individuals within it may have. All right? Content many decisions sound like Christianity really isn't anti-Semitic. The Bible isn't just a book of myths and legends. I see the difference between Christianity and just being good religious and other religions. Science really hasn't refuted Christianity. I see that God isn't just a nice or mean guy. The Christian view of God is amazing. Wow, Christianity actually has a way of dealing with the problem of pluralism, relativism, and tolerance. It's not so stupid after all. And the climactic point is, I see the big picture of Christianity. Van Auken writes about reaching a point where he and his wife began to wrestle with what Christians actually believed, the content of the Christian faith. What was happening was that our mind's gaze, almost without our knowing it, was being directed towards the Christian faith that animated our living contemporary Christian friends. We became interested, absorbed in the study of Christianity right from the start, though it still was only a study. After this period of reading various Christian apologists, Van Auken confesses, I writhed a bit at the thought of my easy know-nothing contempt over the years. Most of the people who reject Christianity know almost nothing of what they are rejecting. Thank God, if there is a God, we said, that we aren't at least looking seriously and honestly at the thing. You know, so they felt prideful that they weren't like so clueless as the other people who reject Christianity. All right. Here we go. Now, credibility, coherence, many decisions. Here the truth of Christian belief begins to be dealt with. The new content and new experiences of relationship begin to undermine the hostile worldview and make Christianity deeply compelling. This is going to take a while, right, in people's lives. This is just doesn't happen overnight. And so here's what takes place. I see that science and the Bible really do go together. I see the Bible really is historically reliable. There really were eyewitnesses to the resurrection. Jesus really is God. And then the climactic point, Christianity is the only worldview that makes real sense. When Van Auken is led to actually wrestle, there's your word, with the truth of Christianity, he turns to two sources. The apologetic writings of Lewis and Chesterton and Williams and Sayers, and his circle of Christian friends. While books were important for Van Auken, his personal interaction with his Christian friends and C.S. Lewis, his friends with him, enabled him to deal with his specific questions and problems more directly. But this phase is not just intellectual. Here's what Jeremy Jones writes. He says, it's my opinion that the credibility of Christianity in a postmodern context cannot be established apart from participation in a Christian plausibility structure. What is that? Authentic Christian community. I don't know if you look at it this way, but our church is a plausibility structure to undermine people's views of what Christians are, to dismantle straw man opinions. We do this together. We do it individually in our workplaces or wherever we go, but we do it as a church body as well. We need to see ourselves this way. Because people see us as something else if we don't see ourselves as a way in which to help put away those false plausibility errors. Here we go. Listen to how the unbelieving Van Auken describes the effect of being in Christian worship. It was not precisely that we were being called upon to accept that faith, but that we were being called upon to acknowledge its existence as an ancient and living force. There was a terrible splendor in these churches with their glorious glowing glass, and in their music of the plain song, and in the words of the liturgy. The splendor, of course, did not mean that the faith was true, but perhaps we felt vaguely that it did somehow hint had validity. We have a gentleman who was worshiping in our church a couple weeks ago, and Leslie, you remember that, he came up afterwards, and he's not a believer, at least not yet. He's someone we've been sharing our lives with, and there was one song that the words that just struck him, and it was a poignant moment in his life, right? So, commitment decisions. This is when they actually cross the line into faith. Lots has been written about this. I'm not going to write much. This is when you actually feel like the person is wanting to hear the one-verse evangelism, right? You're not forcing it down someone's throat. And then people come to realize I'm a sinner, I need a Savior. Jesus is the only way for me to be saved. Though there are lots of costs, I really must obey him, and I will believe in him and live for him. So, I mean, when you look at all that, and I know for some of, I mean, I've been thinking on this stuff for a number of years, but some of you this is kind of new. It probably seems like this is right. We see it all around us, right? These defeater beliefs and this, how implausible Christianity is to people, how important relationships must be for all this. And, you know, it can seem kind of scary, right? It's like, do I really need to be that kind of Christian who's like really fully engaged and knowledgeable and loving and compassionate for my neighbors? And yeah. So I really need to be a kind of Christian who's gentle and kind and is okay to get chewed out with and misunderstood and is patient and willing to wait for others to go through the process before I hit them over the head with the Bible tract or something. Yeah. You know. So it can seem kind of intimidating. When we really look at how the Bible calls us to love our neighbors and evangelize them, it's not it's not like a 5-minute thing. This is like investing our lives, right? In people's lives. And this, it's costly, right? No wonder Jesus said, let the dead bury their dead. You know, Jesus, I got a family, I got to bury some dead relatives. No, come with me, right? But on the flip side, people go through this process all the time. It's the process I went through, little mini decisions. There was things I had to wrestle with that, Christianity went from being implausible to being the greatest joy I could ever experience. A number of you went through that as well, right? And so Van Auken went through it. Some of the most hardest, staunchest adversaries of Christianity have come to bow a knee to Christ. And they're here in our community. They're everywhere in our community. They're driving by right now, right? And we're here. What other church is going to do this? There's a few others out here, but, let's do our job well, right? And so we need to understand how people think and how culture influences them and how these defeater beliefs they're really deeply ingrained. People don't just go, oh, I got a defeater belief. That was really stupid of me. And like chuck it, right? No, it's like a root canal, It's like, so anyway, okay, did you just get a root canal? Is that not a good thought? Okay. Right. It's like laser tattoo removal. Okay. Everyone's here like, I never had that. All right, so.
Using the surface, Mark.
Yeah. All right, so. Here's what we're going to do. If you look in your book here, I go through and put down responses to every one of these defeater beliefs we just looked at earlier. We don't have time to go through them all. I just want to go through 2 of them. And truthfully, these are really short answers. And they might not be the best answers. You might have better ones. Perhaps you might go on a quest of learning more of them, so you'd be better equipped to answer them. That's our hope. So, in the Reason for God, the Keller ones you'll see, the other ones you'll find elsewhere, and then in the remainder of the class workbook, you'll see them very addressed very limited, in a very limited scope. So there just can't be one true religion, right? I mean, I believe this for a long, long time. Ultimately, this defeater is self-defeating philosophically. The contention that there cannot be universal religious truth is an example of a supposedly universal religious truth. Does that make sense? You know, to say to a Christian, there can't just be one true religion because all religions must be equally viable. That itself is an exclusive truth that you are holding. It's just as offensive, right? So the idea that every religion must tolerate other religions is itself an intolerant statement. Further, it is actually quite an arrogant statement, because those who advocate religious pluralism claim for themselves a vantage point to see what none of the great religions of the world sees, that each of religions is just a path. It's quite arrogant to say that. All the world religions, they're just paths. Well, how do you know? I just know. Right? That's an exclusive truth claim. Every bit as much as a Muslim saying Islam is the only way. It's exclusive, just like Christianity. But people don't think it that way, right? Right? Because they're culturally conditioned, not just intellectually trained. So everyone is actually intolerant of something. Everyone is an absolutist of some type, right? So inclusivism is really covert exclusivism. It is common to hear people say, no one should insist their view of the Bible better than all the rest. Every religion is equally valid. But what you just said could only be true if, first, there is no God at all, or second, God is an impersonal force that doesn't care what your doctrinal beliefs about him are. So as you speak, you're assuming, by faith, a very particular view of God, and you are pushing it as better than the rest. That is at best inconsistent, and at worst hypocritical, since you're doing the very thing you are forbidding. To say all religions are equally valid is itself a very white Western view based in the European Enlightenment's idea of knowledge and values. Why should that view be privileged over anyone else's? This means that everyone has the problem of how to deal with people they don't agree with, and Christianity has powerful resources for this. The gospel that we're saved not because we're the smartest or most courageous than other people should bring humility and patience with others. We are called to more than mere tolerance. We are called to love even our enemies. This is what Jesus did. He loved us. Only those who don't have to depend on their goodness or rightness for salvation can have the security to love others and listen to and learn from others who are made in God's image, as well as the freedom to disagree with those who might hate us for it. In other words, the solution to the problem in intolerance is not less fervent belief, but more fervent belief in the true gospel. All right, so that's just a really quick summary of how you could perhaps think through that defeater belief, right? Once again, we're not going to say, oh, you got that defeater belief, let me cut it out and hand you my notes from my class on evangelism, right? So if you have friends, and that's like a defeater belief we should all just learn, spend time studying, so that we feel comfortable asking questions around it, and then kind of, poking holes in it, or like, how do you say, you get like a little crack? What do you say when you like pry into the crack?
That sounds good.
Wedge. Yes, you're wedging into the little cracks of where you can. All right, so anyway.
We also can't just say that stuff. You have to like study it and know
Yes,
it and say it in a way that comes across.
All that is a summary
understandable.
of a whole chapter in a book. All right, so and perhaps some of you kind of got a little lost in there because it was summary statements. All right, so how could a good God allow suffering? Okay, this is a common one. Remember that for many people. Remember, this is not only an intellectual conundrum. but it is also an intensely personal problem. Their own personal lives are marred by tragedy, abuse, and injustice. It is vital that we do not just suggest that the Christian solution to the problem of evil explains it away so that evil no longer hurts, right? And sometimes Christians can be just kind of a little patsy with their responses. Well, you know, if you really just trusted in God, it would all be okay. You know, we say stuff like that when we should just shut up and just suffer with the person, right? Hold their hand, right? The prophet Isaiah declares, "Woe to those who call evil good and those who call good evil." God's sovereignty does not eliminate good and evil as real categories. We will not be able to speak a response until we have taken evil and suffering seriously and have shown this to others by not offering silly, pat answers. Here's a brief response from Keller. If God himself has suffered, our suffering isn't senseless. First, if you have a God great and transcendent enough to be mad at because he hasn't stopped evil and suffering in the world, then you have to, at the same moment, have a God great and transcendent enough to have good reasons for allowing it to continue that you can't know. You can't have it both ways. Second, though we don't know the reasons why he allows it to continue, he can't be indifferent or uncaring, because the Christian God, unlike the gods of the other religions, takes our misery and suffering so seriously that he's willing to get involved with it himself. On the cross, Jesus suffered with us. Our God has scars. Don't ever attempt to give an answer to the problem of suffering that doesn't bring in the suffering of Jesus. Right? All right, so how does this study of defeated beliefs challenge or inform? You gotta skip all the way to page 17. Because you gotta skip over all this stuff. How does it challenge or inform your understanding? This is where you get to kind of share, this scares me, or this is cool, or I never thought of this, or I've got this great uncle.